Have you observed how the most generous individuals often carry an air of weariness? Those who consistently appear to support everyone around them with unwavering positivity. They are the ones who invariably arrive on time, offer a warm grin, and agree to assist without hesitation. Yet, upon closer examination, a subtle fatigue lingers in their gaze, hinting at underlying burdens that weigh heavily beneath the surface of their benevolence. Society tends to view generosity as an untainted virtue, encouraging youngsters to embody it, praising it in authority figures, and using it as a benchmark for personal integrity through the depth of empathy shown. However, in our intricate reality, every positive trait harbors complexities, and overlooking these can transform even the noblest intentions into sources of harm. This pattern often originates subtly during formative years, where accommodating others secures affection and validation. By sidelining personal desires to ensure comfort for peers or family, rewards like approval and warmth follow, especially if unconditional regard was scarce before. Gradually, this linkage embeds itself in one's core responses, equating helpfulness with security. As maturity advances, distinguishing self from external demands grows challenging, leading to roles as the dependable ally or the uncomplaining supporter. In essence, when benevolence stems from apprehension of isolation or an urgent quest for affirmation, it morphs into a facade rather than authentic expression. Prolonged facades erode the vitality of the wearer, much like a veil that constricts breathing over time. Consider those perpetual helpers in your circle. They absorb endless tales of woe, aid in relocations, extend financial aid beyond their means, or forfeit sleep to prioritize your stability. Initially, this seems noble, almost divine, but those immersed in such patterns recognize the hidden toll, a simmering bitterness that questions personal equity, though rarely voiced, as perpetual giving implies self-prioritization is taboo. Experts in mental well-being term this depletion as empathy drain, occurring when prolonged extension of understanding and support exhausts reserves. Caregivers in medical fields, educators and caregivers encounter it routinely, but it afflicts ordinary folks who pride themselves on empathy too. Investigations reveal that habitual self-subordination correlates with elevated instances of worry, melancholy, and somatic ailments versus those practicing equilibrium. Unrestrained benevolence erodes identity, akin to nurturing all flora, while starving one's foundation, culminating in collapse that dooms the whole ecosystem. More disturbingly, such giving can inadvertently arm others against the giver, not through overt deceit, but subtly, as reputation for accommodation fosters reliance, molding interactions where one's preferences recede. Assumptions arise that adaptation is default, diminishing inquiries into desires, rendering the giver peripheral. This irony amplifies, greater yielding heightens obscurity, where seclusion masquerades as civility. True benevolence thrives, distinct from its corrupted form. Authentic care emerges from surplus, restorative, and rooted in security, whereas obligatory aid drains from voids, fostering decay driven by insecurity. Empirical work in behavioral science, such as from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, indicates that difficulty in refusal, common among the accommodating types, heightens vulnerability to depletion syndromes. Research from institutions like the University of California, Berkeley, affirms voluntary aid boosts fulfillment, but coerced acts from duty or dread inversely diminish joy and amplify tension. Many ensnare themselves in repetition, fearing letdowns, shunning self-centered labels, or safeguarding bonds through concessions, eroding self-awareness until identity fuses with servitude. Suppressed urges accumulate unseen, intensifying until manifesting uncontrollably, perhaps abrupt irritability over trifles, veiled barbs or explosive releases, shocking even the self. Far from shielding darkness, untruthful aid cultivates it, as each acquiescence against instinct betrays inner truth, inviting repercussion. Cultural imprinting explains this boundary aversion among empathetic souls. Early lessons link worth to compliance, authenticity to risk, affection to offerings rather than essence. Upbringing's tie and regard to compliance imprint this, blurring accommodation with virtue in adulthood. Genuine aid encompasses self-preservation. If it undermines vitality or serenity, its disregard veiled as morality. Brain science illuminates via resonance cells, enabling emotional mirroring for connection. Witnessing distress activates similar neural pathways, fostering innate linkage, yet unchecked immersion floods systems with distress cues, yielding sustained tension, immunity dips, and effective burnout. Thus, the peril lies not in aid itself, but its distortion by past scars, societal pressures, and fears into a facade that internally devours. If exhaustion, bitterness, or erasure resonate despite a claim for empathy, recognize this as systemic fallout from unbalanced teachings, not flaw. Unvoiced realities demand emergence, prompting inquiry: how to foster care without self-sacrifice, sustain empathy sans victimhood, cherish externally without internal void, commence internally, absent self-inclusion, its enactment destined to falter. Analogous to aviation directives, secure personal air supply, pre-assisting, neglect invites incapacity to aid, limits daunting for empathetic natures, as seeming rebuff or egoism, embody candor, delineating capacity preserves integrity, averting bitterness. Experts define limits as demarcations safeguarding individuality. Absent them, ties devolve into entanglement or quiet torment, while present they yield clarity, reciprocity, and esteem. Data shows boundary adherents forge profounder links, their aid elective and thus potent, enhancing credibility as sincere commitments shine. Challenges persist. Affirming self may unsettle lifelong self-denial, risking relational shifts or accusations of alteration. Yet, imbalanced pacts warrant re-evaluation. Deeper, excessive aid, termed altruism pathology, harms giver or recipient, like health forfeiture for care or stunting autonomy, via perpetual rescue. Societal ideals of virtue often subtly promote self-effacement, lauding undemanding compliance. Authentic virtue integrates wholeness with care, liberating when voluntary, confining when fearful. Practical shifts demand cultivation. Hesitate before assent, assessing alignment and capacity. Craft soft refusals, affirming regard yet limits, affirm inherent value beyond deeds. Cultivate personal sustenance for overflow. Embrace discomfort signals as directional aids. Masks of accommodation burden. Unveiling permits genuine expression, balancing assent and denial. Solitude reveals self-treatment, foundational to outward care. Self-compassion amplifies external potency from plenitude. Ultimately, peril resides in disregard. Confronting yields resilient aid, sustaining all, courageous truth, embodies needed care. Integrated, unapologetic wholeness. Expanding on this, reflect on how early experiences shape these dynamics. Children in homes where praise hinges on helpfulness internalize that visibility demands performance, forging neural pathways where refusal evokes shame. Over decades, this solidifies, making boundary assertion feel like betrayal. Yet neuroplasticity offers hope. Deliberate practices rewire toward equilibrium. For instance, mindfulness techniques quiet automatic compliance, allowing discernment between genuine desire and conditioned response. In professional realms, like nursing where empathy drain prevails, studies show over 80% effective protocols incorporating self-checks mitigate risks, preserving efficacy. Consider relational impacts. Unchecked giving trains recipients to undervalue, perpetuating cycles. A friend perpetually aided may overlook reciprocity, assuming availability. Boundaries disrupt this, fostering equity. Initial resistance fades as authenticity builds trust. Research on interpersonal competence links firm limits to deeper bonds, as selective engagement signals value. Physically, chronic yielding elevates cortisol, inviting ailments from hypertension to immunity compromise. Per health psychology findings, pathological giving manifests diversely, codependency sustaining harmful habits, or hoarding strays at personal cost. Barbara Oakley's work details how intent harms when ignoring trade-offs, like enabling addiction under aid guise. In empathy, mirror cells amplify this. Hyperactive insensitives, they flood with others' distress absent filters, yielding exhaustion. Studies on empaths reveal heightened anterior cingulate activation, explaining rapid depletion yet profound connection potential. To counter, integrate routines, daily self-audits, query energy alignment, scripted responses, ease refusal, e.g., appreciate the ask, but unavailable now. Reframe identity from giver to balanced contributor. Therapy unpacks origins, like conditional love roots. Socially, model for youth. Teach limits as respect, not rejection. Outcomes, reduced anxiety, per Berkeley altruism, probes elevated satisfaction from authentic acts. In families, boundaries prevent enmeshment. Parents modeling self-care teach children resilience. Romantic ties thrive on mutual limits, averting resentment. Professionally, they curb overload. Oncology nurses with boundaries report lower fatigue scores. Culturally, challenge nice myths. Media glorifying sacrifice ignores tolls. Ultimately, transformed aid mirrors truth, choice over compulsion, query intent, fear or freedom, abundance sustains, addressing neglect, unveils radiant capacity, mutual vitality. Delve further into neuroscience. Resonance cells, discovered in primates, fired during action and observation, underpinning imitation and understanding. In humans, they extend to emotions. PEV MRI scans showing insular overlap in pain sharing. Yet, exhaustion arises from unchecked activation. Chronic mirroring mimics personal trauma, pair vicarious stress models. Interventions like boundary training dampen overfiring, preserving empathy sans burnout. Psychological profiles vary. Some pleasers stem from attachment insecurities, fearing abandonment prompts over-accommodation. Dependent traits amplify this, linking to disorders where autonomy erodes. Latent analyses of pleasing scales identify severity gradients, correlating high levels with well-being dips among students. Benefits abound. Boundaries boost self-efficacy. Pristine theories. They filter toxicities, enhancing discernment. In therapy, they facilitate recovery from relational trauma, rebuilding agency. Collectively promoting boundary literacy counters cultural self-erasure, fostering societies valuing wholeness. Practices evolve. Journaling tracks patterns, revealing triggers. Roleplay refines articulation. Support networks affirm shifts, countering isolation. Long-term, this yields liberation. Aid from strength, not void. Illuminating paths where compassion endures, unyielding, yet unbound. Consider global contexts. In collectivist cultures, individual limits clash with harmony ideals. Yet studies show balanced empathy reduces collective stress. Western individualism risks isolation sans connection. Synthesis via mindful limits optimizes. Evolutionary views posit mirroring aided survival through tribal bonds, but modern excesses demand adaptation. For healers, therapists, volunteers, self-compassion buffers, Lebanon's clinician study links it inversely to depletion dimensions. Apps targeting mindfulness yield meta-analytic gains in accomplishment, curbing exhaustion. Pre-professionals benefit from early education, per resilience-building research. Invisibility's cost. Pleasers report identity loss, per qualitative fatigue accounts, bruises in the soul, physical echoes, headaches, tearfulness from unrelenting drain. Refusal empowers reclamation, authenticity magnetizing reciprocal care. Journey inward. Solitude's mirror reflects self-kindness deficits, nurture via rest. Forgiveness, overflow follows. Irony. Self-prioritization amplifies outward impact, inspiring elevation over dependence. Final transformation. Peril in neglect. Facing unveils. Potent, integrated benevolence. Truth's embodiment. Sustaining essence, without apology. This care world craves courageous wholeness, love undiminished.